Thanks for downloading Pave the Way Podcast. On this show, your host, Greg Helbeck, interviews the top minds in real estate, business, and personal development to help you crack the code so you can grow your business and, more importantly, grow your life. Get ready for another game-changing episode. If you want to learn how to master your day and become a productivity monster, download Greg's free guide on daily personal productivity for free at www.pavetheday.com. That's Pave the Day, spelled DAY.com. Now it's time for today's episode. Enjoy.
All right, everyone. Welcome back to the show. I'm here with Steve Rozenberg, and I'm really excited to get into this interview. I've seen Steve around the internet, seen him on Bigger Pockets. I've seen him all over the place, and I'm looking forward to getting to know his background on today's show. So, Steve, thanks so much for joining me today.
Appreciate you having me on. Thanks a lot.
Awesome. It's interesting. I know before we did this interview, before we hit record, I was doing some homework on you, and your face looked very familiar, and I'm like, this guy seems very familiar. So I'm looking forward to, finding out more about him and getting into his journey. So, if people are not familiar with you, just kind of give the listeners a little bit about, your background, who you are, where you're from, and then we'll get into your real estate stuff.
Yeah, sure. This could be I'm like an onion, right? I got a lot of layers, but I've been doing this for about 20 years in the real estate business. Never, to be completely honest, I never wanted to be in real estate. This, probably like many of your listeners, this is a first or a second option career for me. My first job, my first love of my life was flying airplanes, being an airline pilot. I still am an airline pilot. I fly for a major airline, fly a Boeing 787 for a major commercial airliner. But the safety and security of having a job kind of smacked me in the face, I guess you could say, after 9/11. So I had the best job in the world. I was 25 years old. I was flying for the airlines. And 2 days after 9/11, I got hit with a furlough notice that basically said, wow, hey, you know what? That safe, secure job is not safe and it's not very secure. So good luck to you. And, it's very humbling for people. I'm sure people on your show as well, that all of a sudden you're doing one thing and going down a path of life and doing all the things right, and something that's not really affected you. You didn't have anything to do with it, but now your life has changed as a result of it. And that's what happened to me. So I just started looking to see what I could do because I wasn't very smart or talented. And I thought, well, what could I do besides fly a metal tube around in the sky? And real estate kind of kept popping up on my radar. Just seemed like people that were wealthy were tied to real estate one way or the other. So I started learning, bought courses, read about a book a week on real estate, and did everything I could to try to just learn this whole new society. I bought some houses. I learned to wholesale. I did very, very good at wholesaling. Did so well that I bought an apartment complex with the money that I made after several years of doing this on a larger scale. But I was always still on the verge of losing a job. Now, I still am an airline pilot. I love what I do, but I realized that it could be taken away at any moment. So my business partner and I, we started a property management company, and we really started the company because we had a bunch of crappy houses that nobody would manage. To be completely honest, had about 40 or 50 houses that were low income properties and were very, very tough. So we had to manage them ourselves. So we started a business. We scaled that business to over 1,000 properties. We became the fastest growing company in the state of Texas. We ended up being in 3 cities with virtual assistants in 3 different countries, running our company. And we ended up selling that business to a venture capital backed company and exited the whole deal.
That's awesome.
So during that time, I was speaking. I traveled all over Australia, all over the United States as a paid speaker, speaking on business, real estate, property management, kind of all those things. And I just learned to be better at what I do. So now I'm kind of an influencer, like you said. I still fly an airplane, so I still have a job. The whole time we built our business, I had a job. So I don't take excuses. So now I coach people, I mentor them, and I just show them how it's not rocket science. Anyone can do this. You just need the right recipe.
Absolutely. And are you based out of the Dallas area? What city in Texas are you living in now?
I'm in Houston, Texas.
You're in Houston. Okay. That's a huge city. I was in Houston for a couple days back in 2019, I think. And I was blown away with how big that city was because I stayed in on the west end of Houston near all the, I don't know where, off near Katy. And I thought I was staying in downtown. And me and my buddy went to go fishing, and I'm like, it was like an hour to get to his boat. And I'm like, dude, I thought Houston was like a, smallish big city, huge. So I didn't understand how big it was down there.
Yeah, it's a big place. We joke and say you need like a visa or a passport to get from one side to the other, or at least to refill your gas tank.
Yeah, no, for sure. Now you're based on Houston. Now, when you're flying now, I'm assuming, I don't know much about the pilot business, but is it kind of like a scenario where you're going to be working hard for 3 or 4 days flying, and then you have like 5 days off or 4 days off? Or how do you balance
the routes that I do, the company that I fly for, I do all international. So I go down to South America, I go to Europe. I was doing it pre-COVID. I was doing Australia all the time. So, you work for 3-4 days and then I'm off. So I work a couple times a month. But in real estate, with what I do speaking, I can do that anywhere in the world. Doesn't matter where I'm at. I mean, you have a phone, you have a laptop. I do stuff all over. I was actually coaching businesses while I was in Australia on layovers. I was actually coaching real estate businesses on my layovers while I was there. So you can do it anywhere. Yeah.
That's awesome, man. You get to see the world. That's amazing. And then a quick flying question, then we'll get into the real estate. Now I fly a lot. I fly from New York to California all the time. I live in both areas. And it seems to me, from a guy who just flies on planes, doesn't fly the planes, they pretty much fly themselves nowadays, right? I mean, it seems like that's the case.
Yeah. I mean, there's so much automation. I mean, you almost need to be have an MIT degree to just change a circuit breaker out, basically. But I fly the 787, which is it's fairly new, fairly advanced. And yeah, they are very, very, very automated. We always joke, they pay us for when you blow an engine at 40,000 feet over the Pacific. There's not really a computer program to fix that one yet. Yeah, there may be at one point, but we're paid for the 10 seconds of sheer terror when things go wrong. That's kind of when we earn our money, we say.
Yeah, that's awesome. Yeah, and that's true. It's funny. I'm pretty comfortable on flights, but sometimes if I'm flying like over an ocean or whatever, going to Hawaii or Europe, I'm like, man, if you really think about this is a little sketchy. I mean, something were to happen, I don't know you don't really know what the outcome is, but flying is obviously very safe. And when you're an expert pilot, you obviously know that more than the consumer. So let's get back into the real estate. So you jumped in the business, you said you started wholesaling. We'll get into that. And then want to cover some of the apartment stuff. Now, there's a lot of wholesalers that listen to the show, a lot of wholesalers. And I do like a free call once a week where I have new investors. They get on the horn for me, no strings attached. And I give them some real solid advice. And I would say that maybe 90% of them are, aspiring wholesalers, or maybe they've done a wholesale deal. So from your experience doing this for a long time and now coaching and training people, if you had to boil down wholesaling to its simplest form, like, you need to get good at this and you need to get good at that. In your opinion, what would you say the two vital success factors of wholesaling would be? Because I have my opinions. I'd like to hear other wholesalers' opinions because it's a very popular topic, but at the same time, wholesaling is a very simple business. It's not even almost like it's real estate. It's just sales at the end of the day. And people overcomplicate it all the time. And I'm like, it's really a simple business. It's not easy, but it's simple.
Yeah. I would say that's a good question. The two things that allowed me to scale and that gave me success was I learned to become a master communicator, and I learned how to systematize as much as possible and leverage systemization. So, if I could automate it, I'm a big believer in automate, systemize, outsource, because there's, 24 hours in a day, right? I have no more, you have no more. So I've got to figure out what is the best use of that 24 hours. And number one, my skill set is communicating and negotiating. So I got mentored and I got trained I invested a lot of money to learn how to be a better communicator. That in turn made me a lot of money because I took the time to learn that skill. I was trained specifically by speakers how to negotiate.
Yes.
And then I'm a big believer in automation. Now, when I was doing it, I hate to say way back when, but I was doing this in 2003, 2004. So we didn't have as much online capabilities as we do now. But even then, I turned everything I could into assembly line models of automation and systemization, that if I could figure out a way to automate or systemize something, I was all over it. Now with technology, if you are not automating and systemizing, I'm just to be blunt, you're either dumb or you're lazy. I mean, those are the two things, because it's so easy with technology now. If you're not doing it, you really don't want to scale, because the one thing you said something, and I'll respectfully disagree. I don't think many people have a business when they wholesale. A business is a commercial, profitable enterprise that runs without you. If they have to be involved in any part of that process, meaning if they walk away, will it keep going without them? They don't own a business, they own a job. There's nothing wrong with owning a job, but I think definitions are important. So for someone to think they own a business, when I had my management company, I had 20 employees. I could go away for 2 months and my business would be bigger than when I came back. That's a business. So I think a lot of people think they have a business, but they're really just glorified self-employed people without any systemization, automation, or procedures in effect to run without them being there.
That's so true. And that's the ultimate litmus test. Like if you have to go on vacation or go fly an airplane for 4 days to Australia, do you have to be by your phone or not? Right. That's the truth. And that's it's a truthful question. It's like, yes or no. It's very binary. You know, it's not like, well, it depends on the lead flow. It's like, no, like, do you need to be involved or not?
Yeah. Very true.
Know? Very true. That's awesome. Now, when you were wholesale, do you still wholesale or you kind of do more?
No, I would say I'm probably a little too lazy for that nowadays. I coach people. I coach people who wholesale quite a bit. And I'm very successful and I'm good friends with a lot of people. So I get it. I understand and again, it comes down to communication. I mean, what people don't understand is they think the business they're in is 4 walls and a roof. It's not. They're in the relationship business. They're in the communication business. You're just selling and communicating some other service and you're solving people's problems. You're solving a problem of people who's got a problem, meaning a property, and you're solving someone who wants to buy that property and you're putting them together. So it really is, you're just learning to be a master communicator. And again, that's my glass view, I'll say. So maybe I'm tainted on that, but I was trained. It doesn't matter what business I'm in. Everything is communication. If you're a bad communicator, you're probably going to have a bad business model. In general, it's going to boil down to an issue somewhere, whether it's communicating with employees, communicating with sellers, buyers, contractors, anything. If you're not mastering that to get what you want, you're going to have problems.
I agree with you 100%, especially in the wholesaling business. The service you're selling is, I'm going to buy your house, and the product you're selling is, this is an investment property and this is why you should buy it. And I've found, Steve, that the better I got at communicating, negotiating, selling, air quotes, I've always made more money the better I got at that, because it allowed me to just be a better problem solver, quite frankly. And I can get that message across better and kind of see things from how people are seeing them, and then kind of approach them from where they already are, not where I want them to be. For an example, let's say I'm dealing with a home seller and they, they're very timid and reluctant and, they're skittish. I'm not going to be like, oh, hey, I want to buy. Like, I'm like, hey, listen, Sally, it sounds like you're really nervous about this decision. And, it sounds like the most important thing is going to be just you understanding what all your options are and being able to almost be like a chameleon when you're working with people and understand how they make decisions. So then ultimately you can make the best decision for them and for you. The better you get at that skill, I always say that's like the ultimate skill, is being able to communicate effectively. And it helps you in your personal life too, not only just like your business, like being able to communicate with other people. So, it's a powerful skill and something that people can take away from this podcast, besides the stuff that we're also going to talk about on the rental side, which is another interesting topic. I have some interesting experiences with tenants, and I'm glad you mentioned the whole property management, and actually like you were managing a lot of D-class properties. And I started buying rentals last year, and I found that I've made a lot of mistakes. I don't have a ton of units right now, but I have some. And I've found, at least, and I want your opinion on this, when I let the tenants know that I'm the head honcho, it usually leads to trouble. So now they don't know I exist. Now it's my boss, it's the company, whatever. What have you found, by managing thousands of properties at this point, if you had to boil it down to work with lower type properties, what do you say the keys to success are? Because I've gotten involved and I buy a lot of properties with bad tenants, and it can get challenging if you don't really know what you're doing.
Yeah, you're 100% correct. It's funny, when we had our property management company and we started scaling, bringing on clients, the main property manager we had basically came and had a talk with us and said, you guys have the shittiest properties of the whole portfolio. Me and the owners were like, it's like, your properties are the biggest problem of everyone's. And so, the challenge is, so here, so you got, there's a lot of nuggets in there. Do you mind if I just go back real quick on the wholesale? I'd like to give everyone a quick tip on this.
Sure.
One of the things, and then we'll talk about the rentals. One of the things I would say, if people want to learn, you said it best as being a chameleon. One of the things I learned, there's a thing called DISC profiling, DISC, and it's a personality profiling to where you can categorize people to different categories. I became a master at learning DISC profiling because everyone in the world is a portion of DISC. So if you are a certain portion of DISC and I am another type of DISC, and I'm speaking in the words I use, my language, like I'm very talkative, chatty, and you're a very dominant, bullet pointed, get to the point person, you and I are not going to communicate. So you and I are not going to have subconscious rapport. And if we don't have rapport, we're not going to do a transaction. You said it best when you said be a chameleon. You have to be very, very quick to understand what the DISC profile is of the person you're talking to. I don't care if it's a spouse, child, seller, contractor, you become that DISC because people will create rapport that people that are like them. So for people watching, if you want to become a good communicator, learn about DISC profiling. You can look it up online. There's a lot of stuff about it. I teach classes on it, but you can find stuff free on YouTube. Learn to become a master communicator in DISC, and you would be amazed at how much more business you will make and how much more money you will make by understanding how to communicate with people. So I'll leave that there.
That is a great point. It's almost like if the other person's speaking Spanish and you only know English, you might have a great message to say, but you don't know how to get that message out.
You're not going to communicate with them. And everybody at different stages has a different format of DISC. So I have learned, I did a lot of focusing on it because I was very intrigued by it. I was like, how does this even work? And it's like, look, if you're, I'm a certain person, you're a certain person. If I only speak in my language, we'll call it a language, I'm only communicating with 25% of the population, which means 75% of the population doesn't relate to me. And they're going to go, I don't get that dude. Like he's all over the place. He's bouncing all over the place. I want a number. I'm a matter of fact, or I'm emotional. I'm crying because I'm losing my house and you're bouncing around asking if you want coffee and this and that. You've got to create rapport at a subconscious level, and DISC profiling will teach that. And if you ever want it, I'm happy to do a workshop on DISC because I think it's so good to learn and understand, because once I've taught it to people in the past, they're like, oh my God, like my wife is that way. My husband, my children, all of a sudden things start opening up and you start realizing why you're able to get, you leave somewhere and you're like, I don't know what it was. I just like that person.
Yeah.
Get along. It's because you had the same type of DISC, and it's called negotiate or establishing rapport at a subconscious level. So anyway, sorry. I thought that was
awesome. I'm glad you added that.
So going back to the rental property. So this is the biggest challenge that I have seen in rental properties. And I say this because I made all these mistakes. So let me just give you some background. Before we started our company, we were in a world of problems. We had about, I'm going to say maybe 40, 45 houses at the time. We had a 30% eviction rate. Our tenants lasted 8 months. Every time they left, they would take a lot of parting gifts with them, like wiring, electrical, plants. I actually wrote a book. I wrote a book on my life and my story because it was so horrible. And so it's almost funny now. At the time, it wasn't funny, but now it's kind of funny. We made all these mistakes. So everybody makes them. Look, I'm just like everyone else here. I have taken my licks. I've been ripped off. I've been robbed from, you name it. It's happened to me, just like it happens to everyone. And you know what? No one's special. No one's immune to it. If anyone says they're lying, right? Everybody has scars. If they've walked that walk, if they've been in war, they're going to have wounds, right? And I have many, many war wounds of me. But going back to your question, the one thing that you have to do is, number one, you own a business. Okay. When you own one rental property or you own 50, you own a business. That business is governed by policies, procedures, structure, and more importantly, the law. Okay. So here's an example. You have a lease contract with your tenant. I don't care if you're best friends with them. I don't care if you act like you don't own the property. It doesn't matter. I'm running a business. If you own a liquor store, do you care if people know that you're the owner or you're the manager? At the end of the day, it's irrelevant. The business is a life of its own. And the more that we identify ourselves as a landlord who owns the property, and we don't know how to disassociate ourselves from owning that business, we're never going to get to the fact of having that run on its own. Like I said earlier, of having it being in business. So the first thing I would say is you have to mentally step out of thinking that you're the landlord and say, you know what? I own XYZ property business. That property business owns 15 houses, let's say. That is a self-living, breathing on its own entity. Has nothing to do with me. I feed it, I manage it, I kind of massage it, but it's on its own. And you want to approach it that way. Now, the biggest challenge landlords have is they do not follow the rules and they don't follow the law. I'll give you a perfect example. And again, I have done this, so I'm not throwing stones in glass house. Let's say you have rent due on the 1st. This is very, very common in low-income properties. Let's say rent's due on the 1st, which is a Wednesday. Or let's say it's Monday. Sorry, let's say it's Monday. Monday rolls around. It's the 1st of the month. Rent is due. Nothing. Okay, now it's the 3rd. So your lease agreement says rent's due by the 3rd, and it's probably eviction starts on the 4th. Does your lease say something like this?
Yeah, it's something like that. I mean, New York State, the landlord laws aren't in favor, but
Right.
It's similar to that. Yeah.
Okay, so the reality is rent is due on the 1st. It's not due on the 3rd. It's actually due on the 1st. You're giving them a grace period to, let's say, the 3rd. Okay, so that's the first misunderstanding, is the landlords don't understand what the contract says. Okay, number one. Number two, you have a signed contract. That signed contract says that you expect them to pay rent on the 1st, and you're giving them till the 3rd. That contract also states, and again, I'll use generic numbers here, that on the 4th, it is now considered late and there are late fees due and the eviction process starts. You, the landlord, do not have the option and the discretion to decide whether you do or do not charge late fees. It is in the contract that you signed and they signed. So let's say, and again, I've done this where you say, okay, rent's due on the 1st. It's now Wednesday. Where's my money? Oh, I get paid on Friday. Okay, you know what? Just get it to me on Friday. I don't care. I just want the money and we'll go about our ways. Friday rolls around. They give you half the money, right? I mean, we've all done this, right? They give you, I'll have the rest. I get paid next week. I'll give you the rest. Fuck. Okay, you know what? Give me the rest. You're stretching this out, right? Now, all of a sudden, now you're getting strung along. Let me ask you a question. Who's the first person that voided that contract? You or the tenant?
Me.
You voided the contract because the contract stated if they don't perform by the 3rd, you have to perform. So I am now seeing judges go into court and say, wait a second. So you want rent and you want a certain amount and you want it on a certain day, but yet you decide when you want to let other things go. It doesn't work that way. And a contract is enforceable both ways. So I'm voiding your eviction. I'm dismissing the case and you don't have a viable contract because you violated the contract first. I'm not saying all judges do this, but that's what they're doing now because they're protecting the tenants. And the reason they're protecting the tenants is because guess who lives in the areas that vote them in and out of office? You don't live in your rental area. The tenants live in the rental area, and that's where the judges need to be elected. So if the judge is a hard ass on tenants, tenants are going to vote them out because you don't live there. You're not even in that district. So I learned all this owning a company because after I was like, oh man, I did that. So, and I've seen people just turn white because what happens then is the judge says, wait a second, are you allowing all of your tenants to slide? Because if not, you could be discriminating and that's a fair housing violation. Because if you let one slide, let's say somebody who's ethnic with children and you don't let another person slide who's not, now you're discriminating. Now you're violating a fair housing law.
Then you're in trouble.
Now you just open up a Pandora's box of problems because when you get on the backside of a federal fair housing violation, you are guilty until you can prove documentation wise that you did not. So going back to your original question, run it like a business. You know what? It has nothing to do with who you are. It has nothing to do with who the tenant is. It has to do with what is the contract and what was signed and say, you know what? I understand. If you can't pay, you can't stay. It's very, very simple. I don't have the option. You don't have the option. Nobody listening has the option or the variance to deviate from a signed contract. You just don't. Unless you get something written, an addendum in writing that is a staple to the lease that says, in addendum, I am letting them slide for the 3rd of the month, blah, blah, blah. Then you have to send that possibly to all of your residents because as you said, you are in a tenant-friendly state. Now all of your tenants need to be able to be notified that they can slide on their rent too. So the biggest challenge, and again, I was, we had this problem and we finally said, you know what, that's it. And then we realized, a lot of laws that protect them. We didn't know. But the best thing anyone can do, I don't care if you say I own it, I don't own it. That's irrelevant. You know what? So what if I own it? I don't give a shit. I own the property. I run a business. This is my business. Do you want to do business with me or do you not? If you don't, then I understand. And, we managed 1,000 properties. We had tenants that were evicted, this and that. If you treat them with respect, they're not going to trash the property. I mean, we've had some, but in general, we just tell them, listen, we understand if you can't pay, but you understand this is a business and we've got these other things. Now, obviously I get COVID and all the other stuff, but let's say we're going to move past this COVID. We're going to move all past this. At some point, it's like, listen, if you can't pay, then we have to go through the process. The problem is let's say that case scenario of your tenant and you let them string along for 3 weeks, 6 weeks, a month, 2 months. Now you're pissed because you feel that they've emotionally taken advantage of you.
Yes.
When text messages.
That's where it gets hairy. You hit it on the head, man.
Yeah. Cause now you're emotionally pissed. You're like, you know what? I gave this person, they lied to me. You know what? You should have never have let yourself get in that position. We've always learned, and this is what we did is, you know what? We hope you pay and we hope you can stay, but the process has started. We're filing the eviction. And if you can come up with the last month's rent, all the court costs and all the late fees, you can stay. But if you can't pay all of that in full, I don't want your money. Because if they give you $1, you're no longer evicting for rent anymore.
Yep.
So we tell them, you're going to need that money because once we evict you, we're going to sue you for what's left over. And you're not going to be able to rent anywhere because we're reporting to everybody that we evicted you. You can pay your rent and next month we start over like nothing. And again, we don't take it personal. And that's where people get in trouble is they start taking it personal because they allowed it to get personal by being taken advantage of. And that is the biggest mistake new landlords make. And again, I'm not saying I haven't done this because I have, but I've learned from thousands of deals what not to do. And that was the main thing I learned.
Man, that is an absolute golden nugget. I think everyone is probably just jaw dropping because the biggest point that you made was once you allow it to get emotional is when it goes off the rails. Like I have tenants right now and I made them an offer to leave. They didn't leave. I got pissed. I gave them a crazy high offer because in New York, it's really hard to get tenants out. They wouldn't leave. And then they complained and then I'm pissed off and it's just a whole mess. And now I don't do that anymore, obviously. And because of all this, Steve, are there areas in the country that you might not invest in rental properties like some states, or do you don't really care because your policies will be ironclad throughout the nation?
No, you know what? I mean, I normally choose to stay away from tenant friendly states, just because, I grew up, I grew up living in Los Angeles. So I was born and raised in LA. So I'm very familiar with the laws and rentals. And I've had some stuff out there and know people, and it's just, here's the thing, where does my return get the best use? So how much money can I make, or how much of a return can I get back more in one state versus another? And what's the potential downside? So I'm always looking, and again, that's just smart business.
Yeah.
No one is immune from the regulations and laws, but Texas is a very pro landlord state. So, I mean, it makes sense. I'm in Texas. It makes sense to stay in Texas for me, for the most part. I've got other ventures that I do bigger deals outside, but when it comes to dealing with single family, it's kind of, this is a great pond. So I fish in this pond mostly for the most part. Now I coach people on different areas of where they buy out of state. I coach a lot of people on how to buy out of state because maybe their market doesn't sustain what their goals are and what their strategy is. So I help them to identify that. And one of the things, first thing is it a landlord friendly or tenant friendly state? And I'm not saying that's a deciding factor, but it is a contributing factor in your decision-making process, in my opinion.
100%. I agree with you. It all depends. And if you're living in a tenant friendly state, you can do it, but you got to know what you're getting into. And you just got to know it might be a little bit harder. And, when you live in Texas, Florida, Arizona, it is a little bit more beneficial to get a tenant out if it's not COVID. It's because it's the more, landlord friendly state.
Exactly.
And I can talk to you all day about rentals. I want to definitely respect your time. So, as we start to wrap the show up here, I see you all over the place. Like, you're on all these podcasts and you're doing great things. And like, how did you get involved? I know you've done some stuff with Bigger Pockets, man. So how did that end up, happening? Because it's really awesome.
It's funny when when I had my management company, I was doing a lot of speaking. Like I said, I was traveling around the US, I was traveling around Australia. I was doing just a lot of stuff. And so when I sold my company, the company that purchased us, they brought me on as head of their investor education. So I started doing a lot of stuff with them, started doing stuff. I knew a lot of people with bigger pockets. So they asked me to come and be a contributor because, you know, again, I'm pretty unique in the sense that I'm an investor. I owned a management company and I'm an airline pilot. So
yeah,
you can't tell me you can't do something. Just tell me you choose not to, kind of, you know, but I come at things with a lot of different angles. And my thing is, you know, I'm a big believer in chapters in your life. I think everybody has chapters, and I think chapters begin and chapters end. When I had my management company, that was a chapter. It was a very good chapter. The company was doing amazing when we sold it. So, you know, that worked out financially very well for me. And I thought, okay, what is the next chapter in my life? So to me, the next chapter is I like helping people. I like giving back. I've got a lot of, as you can see, a lot of information in this head that I like to give back. If you see me on social media, my YouTube channel, my Instagram, I do a lot of content, a lot of videos, just because I think a lot of people out there, the bar is so low when it comes to gurus. And I tell people I'm not a real estate guy. I own businesses, but real estate is a business. And if you don't treat it that way, you're going to get hurt. And there's a lot of rules. I mean, 1 out of 3 landlords is in a lawsuit every single year for violating fair housing, discrimination, IRS, Texas property code, because they don't understand that they're running it like a business. And it's just a matter of understanding the pool they're swimming in, I guess. So I try to give back as much as I can. And that's kind of my next phase of my life, I guess you could say.
That's awesome, man. Well, you're doing a great job. You know, you're doing a great job, you know, with your information. So as we wrap the show up, I mean, if people wanted to, so 2 things. Number 1, if people wanted to like follow you on social media, you know, my assistant will hear this, you know, after we're done today. What is your social media handles for like Instagram and YouTube? And then we'll get into your website. And if people want to maybe work with you.
Yeah. So if they go to Instagram, it's Rozenberg Steve. So it's ROZENBERG Steve on Instagram. Facebook, other way around, Steve Rozenberg. I've got a pretty cool Facebook group for investors. You know, you just sign up and join. It's free. I also have a YouTube channel. I put out 1 new video a day on YouTube. So I'm awesome. On YouTube. Yeah, I do videos, a lot of content, a lot of education, either real estate, business, mindset. I kind of use those are kind of my realms. And I help people go from 0 doors up to, you know, 50 plus. The majority of things people need to learn is up here. This is the biggest blockage of understanding how to be successful. It's not how hard you work. Hardest work in the room is not the most successful, because if that was the case, construction people would be the wealthiest people on the planet. And they're not, right? Business owners are. So there's a disconnect on what we think we should be doing and what really we should be doing. So I try to bridge that gap, and I do it on social media, Facebook, YouTube, all those things.
Awesome. And then if people want to check out maybe your website or maybe work with you or just kind of get more into your world in depth, you know, what's the best way for them to you know, find that website out or whatever the case might be?
Yeah, they can go to my website is steverozenberg.com. Again, it's ROZENBERG, steverozenberg.com. I do a weekly mastermind. So if they go to, I believe it's livethinktank.com, livethinktank.com. And again, every Monday I bring on top people, a lot of friends of mine from bigger pockets, a lot of top level influencers. I bring them on live Q&A. It's really, really good because it's not just one thing. I don't teach people how to flip or wholesale. I bring everybody on. I mean, all the big names that you know from social media are running through my mastermind as favors to me because I speak at their events and vice versa. And so they can go there. They can go to stevesmindset.com as well. I have a full interactive on-demand course from Lightspeed VT where you can learn everything about real estate. It's all real estate related, on-demand video education. So I just have a lot of things. If you go to my website, you can branch out from there because it's all tagged there. But again, I'm a big believer, whether you talk to me, I mean, I'm very, very accessible. I get people sending me messages all the time on Instagram. I always return it because I think if you took the time to ask me something, I at least owe you the respect to respond. And so I do. Totally. It's just something that I think is respectful. I think it's a matter of, that's just who I am. So if people have questions and they just want to bend my ear, I'm happy to answer them. And, you know, as long as it's not too in depth and I don't have to go to their house and spend the night talking to them about their problems, I'm happy to help them out.
That's awesome. Well, we'll make sure we have all that in the show notes. Steve, it's been an awesome time today. I really appreciate you taking some time out from your busy schedule to speak with us today. And I'm sure some people will be reaching out to you. And I hope you have a great rest of your day, man. This was a fun show.
My pleasure. Thank you. Thanks everyone for watching. Appreciate it.
Thanks for listening to another episode of Pave the Way Podcast. We hope you got value from today's episode. Make sure you download Greg's free guide on daily personal productivity for free at www.pavetheday.com. That's Pave the Day spelled DAY.com. If you have any questions or want to reach out, head over to www.pavethewaypodcast.com. We'll see you on the next episode.